Easy now, Pop, Elias said, a subtle note of patronage in his tone. Wouldn't want you to strain something. Maybe leave the lugging to those of us still collecting birthdays. Those of us still collecting birthdays. The phrase, innocent as it sounded, struck me like a physical blow. I was struggling with an overloaded grocery sack, a testament to my enduring love for canned tomatoes, the plastic cutting into fingers already gnarled with arthritis. Elias, bless his clueless heart, meant well. But did he honestly see me as so thoroughly ancient? I'm managing, I retorted, shifting the bag's weight. The tomatoes threatened to rupture the flimsy barrier. Just need a firmer hold. A chuckle escaped him, a sound more irritating than it should have been. The local fitness center isn't exactly a retirement community, you know. More likely brimming with iron-pumping hulks, not precisely your scene, old-timer. That was the spark. The gauntlet, as they say, lay at my feet. Is that a fact? My voice, I noticed, had taken on a dangerously even quality. I heaved the bag onto the counter, the resulting thump echoing in the sudden stillness. Elias looked marginally concerned, perhaps sensing the shift in the emotional climate. And precisely what makes you think I'm unqualified for gym membership? He stammered, retreating verbally. No, that's not what I meant. It's just, well, you haven't exactly been hoisting compact cars above your head lately. Hoisting compact cars, I echoed, a flicker of a smile touching my lips. Now, there's a challenge. The sting of Elias's words, truth be told, lingered. Not because they were entirely false, compact cars were undeniably beyond my current reach, but because they touched a nerve I'd been desperately ignoring, the insidious sense of becoming obsolete. The world surged forward, and I, Arthur Penhaligon, risked being sidelined to the easy chair and the Sudoku. That simply wouldn't do. Carpentry defined my life, a profession demanding brawn and stamina. Prior to that, the Royal Canadian Air Force. Not a pilot, no, but I kept their metal birds soaring. Countless hours spent in frigid hangars, wrestling with engines, hauling gear, building muscle the honest way. We lacked fancy gyms. Our training ground was the job itself. I recall one particularly savage winter at Goose Bay, Labrador. Temperatures that turned breath to instant ice. We toiled to repair a crippled transport plane, working around the clock in a makeshift shelter offering scant protection. My hands cracked and bled. My body screamed from the cold's gnawing bite, but we persevered. A task demanded completion, that embodied strength. Not merely physical power, but the mental resolve to conquer pain and exhaustion. The discipline to carry on when every cell yearned for respite. Elias, with his protein shakes and curated playlists, would never grasp such grit. All right, wise guy, I declared, popping my knuckles. Let's reevaluate this retirement home assessment, shall we? Bewilderment creased Elias's face. Re-evaluate what? I'm joining the gym, I announced, the words strangely liberating. And I intend to demonstrate that age is merely a number, and this old codger still has a trick or two up his sleeve. His jaw went slack. You're serious? Grave is the grave, I confirmed, heading for the hall closet. Now, where in thunder did I stash those infernal running shoes? Locating the footwear proved the initial obstacle. They lay entombed beneath a mountain of aged coats and derelict umbrellas, a monument to my increasingly inactive existence. Ancient relics from my running days, they would have to suffice. The gym proved an experience. A cacophony of grunts and clanging metal, heavy with the odor of sweat and iron. Lycra-clad youths writhed and strained, their faces masks of intense concentration. I felt a trespasser, a fossil unearthed from a forgotten epoch. My maiden voyage on the treadmill bordered on disastrous. I nearly tripped on the moving belt, eliciting a few amused glances from the millennial contingent. The weight room fared worse. I grappled with the equipment, struggling to adjust the settings, feeling utterly adrift. A young man brimming with naive enthusiasm, barely old enough to shave, approached me with a condescending smile. Need a spot, sir? Perhaps something a tad lighter? I fought the urge to tell him where he might deposit his tad lighter. Instead, I politely declined and limped toward the free weights. I commenced with dumbbells, gingerly probing my limits. 5 pounds. 10. 15. My muscles voiced their objections, but I pressed onward, fueled by sheer stubbornness. The initial weeks proved grueling. Every sinew screamed in mutiny. Aches bloomed in uncharted territories. My archaic fitness wisdom, gleaned from dusty magazines and faded army recollections, proved largely ineffective. Yet I persevered. I delved into contemporary fitness regimens, devouring YouTube tutorials, even reluctantly accepting counsel from some of the younger gym-goers. I discovered proper form, progressive overload, and the vital role of stretching. I tweaked my diet, curtailing sugary indulgences and embracing protein and vegetables. Gradually, results manifested. My muscles gained strength, my stamina grew, and my aches receded. I even managed to impress a few regulars with my dedication and old-school work ethic. A few months into my personal renaissance, Elias paid a visit one evening. I was mid-workout, struggling through a set of pull-ups. He walked in just as I finished my final repetition, sweat-slicked skin gleaming and muscles burning. His jaw dropped. "Grandpa?" he stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Is that really you?" I hit the floor, gasping. "What do you think?" I challenged, flexing my bicep. "Still too decrepit for the gym?" He shook his head, speechless. Admiration filled his gaze, the dawning awareness that he'd misjudged me. I hadn't merely proven him wrong, I had reaffirmed something within myself. I had recalled that age exists only as a number, a mental construct, a flimsy excuse. True strength originates in the mind, in the unwavering faith in one's innate potential. It stems from the discipline to transcend perceived limitations, to never surrender, regardless of the challenge's ferocity. I grabbed my towel and mopped my brow. "Now," I said, a grin splitting my face, "how about you spot me on the bench press? I'm considering aiming for a Volkswagen." He blinked, still processing the transformation he'd witnessed. A Volkswagen? Well, I shrugged. A fellow's got to set lofty goals, wouldn't you agree? Gramps, as usual, knew best. Into the lion's den. Ironclad fitness announced itself like the gateway to some alien discotheque. Pulsating neon, a lurid blend of azure and chartreuse, bled across the tinted windows. The subterranean thump of whatever passed for music vibrated up through my sensible, comfort-designed shoes. It was a universe removed from the quiet dust and scent of cedar in my workshop. I paused, hand still on the Buick's door. Elias's casually dismissive words echoed, "Grandpa, that place is like totally for young blood." The challenge, however subtly delivered, was accepted. Arthur Penhaligon didn't shrink from a dare, even one involving voluntary immersion in this sensory swamp. Taking a bolstering breath, I shoved the door inward. The assault intensified. The air tasted of saccharine punch and faintly acrid metal, like a cyborg's arterial spray. The music, identifiable now as digitally tortured shrieks, felt designed to bore directly into the cerebral cortex. And then, the patrons. Everywhere, bodies honed to an almost fantastical degree. Sweaty men and women, grunting and grimacing, wrestled with intimidating hunks of iron, all impossibly young, impossibly toned, and impossibly bronzed. It was like stumbling onto a set for a superhero recruitment video. A sudden dart of something. Envy, self-doubt, perhaps merely indigestion from that gas station dog. Still, I felt like an extra in a dystopian film, typecast as the bewildered codger. I located a reception desk, manned by a woman whose smile seemed surgically grafted onto her face. "Mabel," her name tag proclaimed, "welcome to Ironclad Fitness," she chirped, her voice surprisingly audible amid the din. "First time? We offer a complimentary introduction for all newcomers." "Introduction?" I rasped, my voice sounding weak and unfamiliar. "Is that anything like boot camp?" Mabel blinked, her smile wavering momentarily. Not exactly. It's more about familiarizing you with the equipment and going over our membership packages." "Equipment," I muttered. taking in the gleaming steel and the intimidating jumble of cables and levers. It resembled a spaceship console more than anything I associated with physical exertion. We'd managed with push-ups, sit-ups, and maybe the odd pull-up back when I was a lad. This was another species of beast altogether. "Right this way," Mabel declared, her smile reasserting itself. She steered me past ranks of treadmills, each occupied by a determined soul logging miles. Spotting a vacant machine, I thought, with naive optimism, that it might be a suitable place to start. "Mind if I gestured towards the treadmill, feigning a confidence I was far from feeling. "Go right ahead," Mabel replied, already angling to intercept another potential member. "Just hit the green button to start, and the red to stop." Seemed straightforward enough, I thought. Infamous last words. I mounted the treadmill, feeling a slight wobble as I found my footing. I pressed the green button. The machine roared to life with an abrupt lurch. I snatched at the handrails just in time to avoid a backward tumble. The belt began moving at what felt like a fast trot rather than a gentle saunter. I struggled to keep pace. My legs, more accustomed to the easy rhythms of woodworking and morning strolls, felt like clumsy stilts. I groped for the speed control, trying to decelerate the blasted thing, but my arthritic fingers fumbled with the tiny buttons. The treadmill accelerated, and I sensed control slipping away. My feet lost purchase, and I flailed, grasping desperately for the rails. For a heart-stopping instant, I was airborne, caught between the relentless churn of the machine and the implacable pull of gravity. A desperate grab allowed me to regain my grip on the rails, but not before my left foot connected hard with the machine's side. A lance of pain shot up my leg, and a yelp escaped my lips, instantly swallowed by the pulsing base. Clinging to the rails, my breath coming in shallow gasps, I felt like a stranded whale beached on this fitness-obsessed shore. I finally located the red button and hammered it with all my might. The treadmill screeched to a halt, leaving me trembling, gasping, feeling every one of my 81 years. A shadow fell across me. I glanced up to see a mountain of muscle looming, his face a study in thinly veiled amusement. The quintessential gym rat, deeply tanned skin, biceps threatening to rip his tank top, and a haircut sculpted with geometric precision. "Everything all right, Pops?" he inquired, his voice dripping with condescension. "Looks like you had a little whoopsie," I glared, a surge of indignation coursing through me. "I'm fine," I retorted, striving for composure. "Just familiarizing myself with the equipment," he chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated the floor. "Yeah, well, these things can be a little tricky. Maybe you should stick to the recumbent bike." He cast a pitying glance, then turned and swaggered off, leaving me feeling like a relic unearthed in a museum of peak physique. My leg throbbed, my pride smarted, and I began to seriously question the wisdom of this whole venture. I felt the urge to retreat, to escape ironclad fitness, and never revisit its door. But then Elias's smug, youthful dismissal flashed in my mind, and I recalled countless instances in my life when I'd been underestimated, dismissed, or disregarded. And a familiar, stubborn ember began to glow within me. I wouldn't concede. I wouldn't let them see me retreat. I would decipher this new lexicon of weights and machines, and I would prove, to myself and to everyone else, that age was a mere statistic. Straightening, I took another deep breath and limped toward the weight room. Time to confront the beast in its lair. This was merely the prelude, and Arthur Penhaligon was just starting to stir, dusting off the past. The sheer audacity of the boy, suggesting I was fit only for the rocking chair, just because my recent exercise regimen peaked with power walking to the refrigerator, didn't equate to complete immobility. I'd disabuse him of that notion. I'd prove them all wrong. A plan was paramount. These modern gyms, with their blinking displays and Byzantine equipment, clearly weren't designed with seasoned gentlemen in mind. Gentlemen who recalled when color television was a marvel. I craved something familiar, something proven. The solution, predictably, resided in the attic. Ascending was a painful audit of my current physical state. Each groan from the pull-down ladder reverberated through my knees, a chorus of complaint from joints more accustomed to the embrace of my favorite armchair. The attic resembled a forgotten pharaoh's tomb, cardboard sarcophagi overflowing with artifacts from a more vigorous existence. I navigated this cardboard jungle, past moth-nibbled uniforms and sepia-toned snapshots, until my fingers brushed against a small, unremarkable box labeled Arcaf. Within, cradled my faded correspondence and a dull-lustered belt buckle, lay the manuals. The 5BX Plan. My Athletic Resurrection. The Royal Canadian Air Force's 5 Basic Exercises. A pair of booklets, one for each gender, conceived to maintain pilot fitness regardless of location. Undeniably simple, undeniably effective, requiring only a patch of floor and a dash of willpower. I flipped through the pages, the sketched figures demonstrating push-ups, sit-ups, and stretches, conjuring a wistful smile. This was it. Simplicity itself. Back in the living room, I cleared a space, ignoring the sardonic gaze of Winston, my tabby, from his perch atop the television. The manual promised a graduated increase in repetitions, beginning at a level tailored for even the most inactive physique. I scoffed. Inactive? I was merely strategically resting. The opening jumping jacks were tolerable. A slight rasp in my breathing perhaps, but nothing critical. Then came the sit-ups, or rather the pathetic simulations of sit-ups. My abdominal muscles, it seemed, had entered suspended animation around the time of bell-bottoms and disco. I managed a paltry 3, each accompanied by a groan loud enough to dislodge Winston from his viewing platform. Next, push-ups. With a shaky exhalation, I lowered myself, completed precisely 1, and promptly collapsed, my face nestled in the shag carpet. Winston, now genuinely concerned, circled me cautiously, sniffing my ear with cautious curiosity. All right, I grumbled, pushing myself upright. Perhaps the RCAF overestimated the hardiness of a body that's witnessed 80 years. The 5BX Plan, admirable in its austerity, was clearly insufficient. A starting point, yes, but situated at ground zero. It was akin to erecting a skyscraper on cottage footings. Wounded but unvanquished, I resolved to confront the iron beast once more. Ironclad fitness beckoned. This time I committed to heightened awareness, diminished recklessness. I ambled through the maze of machines, attempting to decipher their purpose. Levers, pulleys, cables, and pads, the place resembled a futuristic penal colony designed by a sadist with a penchant for engineering. I halted before a particularly menacing apparatus featuring a stack of metal plates and a confounding array of adjustments. A leg press, the tiny label proclaimed. I perched tentatively, fiddling with the settings, struggling to decipher the initial maneuver. A young woman, scarcely old enough to recall pre-broadband internet, approached. A walking advertisement for toned musculature and boundless pep, a striking juxtaposition to my own time-weathered frame. "Need a spot?" she inquired, her tone tinged with both amusement and empathy. "Merely admiring the craftsmanship," I offered, perhaps a tad too hastily. "Exceptional piece of equipment." She stifled a smile. "It's a leg press. Targets your quads, glutes, hamstrings. Great for lower body conditioning." "So I gathered," I muttered. She launched into a meticulous explanation of seat adjustments, weight selection, and exercise execution. I strained to absorb the information, but comprehension proved elusive, akin to trapping water in a net. The lexicon alone was daunting. Reps, sets, progressive overload, eccentric contractions. "So you extend your legs until they're almost straight, but avoid locking your knees," she concluded. Then slowly returned to the starting position. "Right," I said, nodding authoritatively, despite understanding perhaps half of her explanation. I attempted a repetition, pushing with what I hoped was proper form. The resistance felt surprisingly immense. My legs quivered. "Easy there, Pops," she cautioned, spotting. "Maybe dial it back a bit." "Pops?" I bristled inwardly. "The impertinence!" But I recalled my calamitous treadmill experience and chose to subdue my pride. "You might be correct," I conceded. "A man must acknowledge his limits. Recognizing your limitations is the first step toward surpassing them, she retorted with a wink. Everyone starts somewhere. She reconfigured the weight stack, substantially easing the load. I tried again. Still demanding, but manageable. I ground out a few repetitions, concentrating on her counsel, striving for correct form. Not bad, she commended. Keep at it. She continued onward to another machine, abandoning me to my own devices. I persevered with the leg press, gradually, deliberately, savoring the ache in my muscles. It wasn't effortless, but it was progression. As I persevered through another rep, a revelation dawned. This wasn't merely about refuting my grandson's assessment. It wasn't solely about defying the passage of years. It was about reclaiming something I'd presumed lost, a sense of purpose, of strength, of vitality. The gym remained intimidating, the equipment still perplexing, but I was no longer merely an observer. I was now a participant, a student, a man with a mission. And I refused to allow a few aches and complaints, or a patronizing whippersnapper, to impede my progress. Grandpa knows best, after all. The body's rebellion. The next morning, getting out of bed felt like attempting to scale Everest in a straitjacket. Every inch of me screamed in protest. Muscles I hadn't known existed were staging a full-blown rebellion, sending fiery missives of complaint with every twitch and groan. It wasn't a dull ache, mind you, but a sharp, insistent jab that reminded me of Mrs. Higgins' prize-winning roses, beautiful to look at, but treacherous if you got too close. Damn that leg press. And damn that smug grin on my grandson's face, the one that had driven me to this exquisite torment. I shuffled towards the bathroom, each step a carefully calculated maneuver. Brushing my teeth felt like a Herculean task, my arms heavy and uncooperative. Even spitting was an ordeal. As I stared at my reflection, I saw a roadmap of wrinkles etched deeper than usual, framing a face that looked both ancient and absurdly determined. Worth it? I muttered to the mirror, the words a low rumble that barely registered above the symphony of aches. Breakfast was a soggy affair. My usual toast and marmalade felt like a mouthful of gravel. I managed a few bites, washed down with lukewarm tea, before retreating to the armchair, defeated. The newspaper lay unopened in my lap. All I could do was sit and listen to the relentless chorus of my body's grievances. This wouldn't do. I was built of sterner stuff than this. If I was going to silence this internal uprising, I needed information. Knowledge, as they say, is power, and right now, my body held all the power. The internet. That's where the young ones went for answers. I hadn't ventured into its depths much beyond checking my email and occasionally looking up the cricket scores. But desperate times called for desperate measures. My old desktop computer, a relic from a bygone era, whirred to life with a groan that echoed my own. I navigated to the Google search bar, my fingers fumbling over the keys. Optimal protein intake for elderly individuals. Starting exercise. I typed each word a struggle. The results that flooded the screen were overwhelming. Websites with flashing graphics, articles with scientific jargon I couldn't decipher, and forums teeming with opinions ranging from sensible to downright bizarre. Whey protein isolates, creatine monohydrate, branched-chain amino acids. It was a foreign language. I clicked on an article titled The Geriatric Guide to Gains. The language was simplified, thankfully, but the sheer volume of information was still daunting. Apparently, my decades-old understanding of nutrition was hopelessly outdated. I learned that protein wasn't just for bodybuilders anymore. It was crucial for maintaining muscle mass as you aged. Who knew? According to this article, I should be consuming at least twice as much protein as I currently was. Eggs, chicken, fish, legumes, the list went on. My usual diet of toast, tea, and the occasional shepherd's pie suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. I spent the next hour lost in a labyrinth of online information, trying to make sense of it all. It was like trying to assemble a complicated machine with only a vague instruction manual and a handful of mismatched parts. My head swam with numbers, percentages, and conflicting advice. Finally, I stumbled upon a simple chart that outlined the recommended protein intake based on body weight. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I ventured into the kitchen, determined to overhaul my diet. The contents of my refrigerator were underwhelming. A wilting head of lettuce, a half-eaten jar of pickles, and a lone, forgotten sausage were the highlights. Clearly, a trip to the grocery store was in order. The supermarket was a sensory overload, rows upon rows of brightly colored packages, each promising health, vitality, and eternal youth. I wandered through the aisles, feeling like an alien in a strange land. I grabbed some chicken breasts, a carton of eggs, and a bag of lentils, feeling vaguely virtuous. I even considered buying one of those protein powders, but the sheer number of choices paralyzed me. Whey? Soy? Casein? What in the Sam Hill? I muttered. Back home, I attempted to prepare a protein-packed meal. The chicken ended up slightly charred, the lentils a watery mess. It was a far cry from the culinary masterpieces I used to create for my late wife, bless her soul. Despite the less than appetizing results, I forced myself to eat every last bite. I was a man on a mission, and a little culinary imperfection wasn't going to derail me. The next few days were a blur of aching muscles, protein-fueled meals, and relentless research. I experimented with different recipes, gradually improving my cooking skills. I even started tracking my protein intake using a notebook and pen, meticulously recording every gram. The gym remained a source of both dread and determination. Each workout was a battle against my protesting body, but I pushed through, fueled by stubbornness and the memory of my grandson's condescending smile. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to change. The aches became less intense, the fatigue less overwhelming. I found myself moving with a little more ease, a little more spring in my step. One afternoon, as I was heading to the gym, I ran into Mrs. Higgins, my next-door neighbor. She stopped me, her eyes widening in surprise. "Arthur, dear, you look different," she said, peering at me over her spectacles. "Have you been doing something different with your hair?" I chuckled. "No, Mrs. Higgins, it's not my hair. I've been exercising." Her jaw dropped. "Exercising? At your age? Good heavens, Arthur, be careful. You don't want to overdo it." "Don't you worry about me, Mrs. Higgins," I said with a wink. "I'm just getting started." The gym was the same as always, loud music, sweaty bodies, and the ever-present scent of iron and ambition. But this time, I felt a little less out of place. I knew my way around the machines, I had a routine, and I even managed a small nod of acknowledgement from the young woman who had shown me the leg press. As I loaded the weights onto the machine, I noticed a group of young men watching me. They were whispering amongst themselves, their faces a mixture of amusement and disbelief. I ignored them, focusing on my breathing and preparing for the set. I lowered the weight, feeling the familiar burn in my muscles. I pushed back up, gritting my teeth and channeling all my energy into the movement. I completed the set, breathing heavily but feeling a surge of satisfaction. When I looked up, the young men were still watching me, but their expressions had changed. The amusement was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like respect. Maybe, just maybe, I was starting to prove them wrong. Maybe age wasn't a barrier after all. Maybe it was just an excuse. Gramps knows best. The smoothie offensive, the murky green liquid looked less like a health elixir and more like something dredged from the bottom of a forgotten swamp. Not the picturesque kind, mind you, but the kind that whispered tales of lost fishing lures and the ghostly echoes of pollywogs. Berry Blast Protein Powerhouse. The relentlessly cheerful smoothie bar attendant chirped, her youth practically radiating from her pores. I privately dubbed it a berry betrayal. Before me sat this bilious swirl, speckled with what appeared to be chia seeds, tiny black interlopers notorious for their dental siege. I regarded it with the skepticism usually reserved for politicians and their promises. This was the vanguard of modern fitness, the fuel propelling those lean, spring-heeled youths. For 81 years, my mornings had commenced with a ritual of lightly buttered toast, marmalade a welcome addition, a perfectly boiled egg, and a fortifying pot of tea. A breakfast of champions, or at the very least, of unwavering consistency. This felt like sacrilege, but Damien's taunt echoed in my mind. "You're too old, Gramps." The casual cruelty of youth still stung, and though I'd never voice it, he possessed a kernel of truth. I was too old to be dictated by limitations. I lifted the glass, the chill, a rude awakening against my palm. The aroma was vaguely floral, though of the artificial variety, reminiscent of budget air freshener. I steeled myself. This wasn't about palate, it was about defiance. I sampled it. My face recoiled involuntarily. It was a flavor collision of epic proportions, a jarring discord of artificial sweeteners, chalky protein, and a faint, struggling whisper of berry. It tasted like a laboratory mishap. With the resolve of a condemned man, I swallowed. Another sip, another wince. It felt like self-flagellation. The attendant beamed, oblivious. "Great, isn't it? All natural." A feeble nod was the best I could muster, my throat aflame. "Indeed," I rasped. I vanquished the smoothie, every gritty, ungodly drop. It felt akin to consuming a small, indignant mammal. My stomach responded with a series of guttural protests, threatening mutiny. Later, I confronted the next dietary hurdle: Greek yogurt, plain. Fat-free. It squatted in its plastic tub, a stark white void. This was capitulation. Toast, eggs, and tea were nourishment. This was dietary penance. I breached the seal. A delicate tang of sourness wafted upwards, like milk despairing of ever becoming cheese. I took a tentative spoonful. The texture was dense, unctuous, coating my tongue in a veil of utter blandness, an aggressively bland flavor, as if demonstrating the very concept of flavorlessness. Another spoonful followed, then another. A meager drizzle of honey offered a slight rebellion against this austere regime. That evening, attempting to lose myself in a novel, my abdomen launched into a symphony of dissent. Rumbles, gurgles, and the occasional full-throated bellow reverberated from within. It sounded as if a badger were staging a protest rally in my guts. My digestive tract, accustomed to a lifetime of gentle predictability, was decidedly unimpressed. Sleep remained elusive. Each time I began to descend into slumber, a particularly forceful rumble would wrench me back to wakefulness. I thrashed and turned, grappling with my insurgent innards. At 3 a.m, I found myself gazing longingly at a package of digestive biscuits. I resisted the siren call, Damien's face a spectral presence. I refused to be subdued by Greek yogurt and swamp smoothies. The following morning, I dragged myself to the gym, feeling as if I'd tangled with a rogue shopping cart. My muscles screamed, my stomach churned, and I operated on a mere 3 hours of fragmented sleep. Yet, I persevered. I spotted Damien across the floor, wrestling with a weight on the bench press, dangerously close to his maximum. He met my gaze and smirked, confident. I ignored him. I marched towards the squat rack, loaded the bar with a weight that, in truth, bordered on hubris, and commenced my set. My legs trembled, my back voiced strenuous objections, but I pushed onward. As I re-racked the weight, I registered a few of the younger gym-goers watching me, their faces a mixture of surprise and, perhaps, even respect. Perhaps, just perhaps, this torment held merit. Later that week, during bicep curls, Damien materialized, wearing an expression of baffled amazement. He had clearly just emerged from the pool, his hair clinging to his head, a towel draped around his neck. "Gramps," he uttered, his usual bravado absent. I saw you, squatting. You're actually doing it." I grunted in response, my focus laser-locked on my form. And I saw you shirtless the other day, changing. You're sculpted." Sculpted was an embellishment. Let's say, possessing a lower jiggle factor than anticipated. I set down the weights, a slow smile playing on my lips. "What did you expect, Damien? That I'd simply surrender to the stereotype of decrepitude?" He stammered, nonplussed. "No, but, well, you know." "Know what? That the elderly are relegated to armchairs, passively awaiting their expiration dates? That we're incapable of stretching our limits, of embracing challenges, of desiring more from life?" He averted his eyes, shifting uncomfortably. "I didn't mean it that way, Gramps." "Didn't you? Because it reeked of ageism to me. A pause to let the words resonate. Age is a smokescreen, Damien. A convenient excuse for those lacking the determination to strive. True fortitude resides in the mind, not just the muscles. I retrieved my weights, a surge of renewed purpose coursing through my veins. As I resumed my curls, I detected Damien muttering something beneath his breath. I couldn't decipher the exact wording, but I suspected it was along the lines of, "All right, Gramps, message received." Gramps, it seems, still had a few lessons to impart. Agro's guidance. Agnes Kowalski. Brenda, the gym manager with a penchant for unwanted assistance, had hammered the name into my skull. Apparently, within this temple of treadmills and iron, she alone deemed me salvageable from imminent orthopedic disaster. I surveyed the gymnasium, imagining a diminutive yoga sage. Instead, my gaze landed on a figure of formidable proportions. Agnes resembled a fortress. Or, as my father would have put it, a structure not easily shifted by wind or weather. Agro, Brenda had squeaked, a nickname seemingly born of equal parts fear and respect. Agro was currently overseeing a coterie of young men wrestling with a barbell laden with what appeared to be the equivalent of a compact car. The decibel level of her instructions could sour cream across a crowded room. Hesitation gnawed at me. A barrage of Damien's acerbic wit felt preferable to incurring the scrutiny of that woman. Still, a promise was a promise, a concept seemingly archaic these days. I had vowed to prove them wrong. Drawing a fortifying breath, I edged closer, attempting an air of casual confidence. The result likely mimicked a penguin infiltrating a flamingo convention. "Excuse me," I ventured, my voice struggling to compete with the thumping techno beat assaulting my ears. Agro pivoted, her gaze, the color of honed steel, performing a swift and unsettling assessment. "You lost, old-timer?" she rumbled, her voice a subterranean tremor. "Arthur Penhaligon," I replied, extending my hand. "Brenda thought you might offer some pointers." Ignoring my outstretched hand, Agro zeroed in on my distinctly unathletic build. "Pointers? You look like a stiff breeze could topple you, Penhaligon. Why do you imagine you require guidance?" "I'm trying to build strength," I muttered, acutely aware of the perspiration beading on my forehead. "Brenda suggested my technique could use refining." Agro's snort could have extinguished a candle. "Technique? You possess no technique. You resemble someone grappling with an exceptionally tenacious badger." "How delightful." "All right, Penhaligon," she declared, clapping her hands together, the sound like a minor detonation. "Let's take inventory of what we're dealing with." She indicated a squat rack supporting a loaded barbell. My stomach executed a precarious flip. I had been avoiding that apparatus with the dedication one reserves for highly infectious diseases. It appeared to be a relic of medieval torment. "Squats? Right away?" I managed, attempting to inject a semblance of bravado into my tone. "Right away. I am assessing the extent of the damage," Agro corrected. "Now, get beneath the bar." Reluctantly, I obeyed. The icy steel settled across my upper back, a weight that felt exponentially heavier than its actual mass. I initiated a squat, instantly regretting every questionable life choice, especially the one that had led me here. "Halt!" Agro barked before I'd even approached parallel. "What in God's name are you attempting? Your spine looks like a question mark carved in granite. And your elbows? Are they attempting to flee the scene?" My face burned. I straightened, carefully returning the weight to its resting place. "I was always taught to keep my back straight," I argued. "And I failed to see the problem with my elbows." "Straight? You're inviting a slipped disc, Penhaligon. And those elbows are flailing like you're signaling air traffic." Agro circled me, her gaze laser-focused. "We're remedying this, starting now." The next hour was a symphony of mortification. Agro critiqued every twitch, haranguing me about posture, respiration, and foot placement. She poked, prodded, and generally induced a profound sense of ineptitude. The temptation to abandon ship, to retreat to the solace of my armchair and a steaming mug, was overwhelming. Yet, The mental image of Damien's self-satisfied smirk kept me transfixed. Finally, after what felt like an aeon, Agro relented, her expression softening ever so slightly. "All right, Penhaligon," she conceded. "That's marginally improved. Still atrocious, but marginally. Progress is a marathon, not a sprint." A groan threatened to escape. "Tomorrow," she continued, "we tackle deadlifts, and any hint of that rounded back will earn you a corset, guaranteed." The day concluded with a chorus of aches emanating from previously uncharted territories. Each movement served as a stark reminder of my inadequacy, of Agro's implacable censure. I contemplated feigning illness, informing Brenda of my change of heart, content to embrace my destiny as a doddering relic. However, as I wrestled myself from my armchair, I detected something novel. The familiar pang in my lower back, a chronic companion for years, was subdued. Could it be? Was Agro's relentless regimen actually yielding results? The following day found me trudging back to the gymnasium. Agro awaited, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Prepared for more torment, Penhaligon?" she inquired. I straightened, squared my shoulders, and met her flinty gaze. "Let's proceed, Agro." The subsequent weeks dissolved into a haze of perspiration, discomfort, and incessant corrections. Agro pushed me beyond what I deemed possible, demanding flawlessness, tolerating no deviation from proper execution. She was a demanding coach, a stern taskmaster, an unstoppable force. Yet beneath the abrasive exterior, I discerned a burgeoning concern, a genuine investment in my progress, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, progress materialized. My squats deepened, my deadlifts grew heavier. My spine straightened, my elbows aligned. I remained far from capable of hoisting a compact car, but I was no longer a walking orthopedic emergency. One afternoon, mid-set of pull-ups, another feat I dismissed as unattainable, I noticed Damien observing his jaw slack. He watched as I completed the repetitions, grunting with exertion, my muscles protesting. As I dropped to the floor, gasping, he remained transfixed. "Grandpa," he stammered, disbelief coloring his voice. "You're buff." I chuckled, wiping the sweat from my brow. "Not quite buff, Damien, but I'm getting there." He shook his head, clearly struggling to reconcile what he'd witnessed. "I don't understand. How—" "Discipline, Damien," I explained, "and a generous helping of stubbornness. Oh, and a very vocal, relentlessly demanding woman named Agro." Later that week, a chance encounter with the gym mirror yielded a startling revelation. Stripped to the waist post-workout, I scarcely recognized the reflection. The paunch persisted. The wrinkles remained etched, but there was something else. A burgeoning strength, a resurgent vitality, a feeling of accomplishment absent for decades. 81 years young, I was far from finished. And Agro was the catalyst. Departing the gym, feeling the delicious ache in my muscles and a surge of pride in my accomplishments, I couldn't suppress a smile. Damien, and the rest, had written me off as ancient, fragile, and immutable. They believed my best days were behind me. They were mistaken. Grandpa, it turns out, still had a few tricks up his sleeve. Whispers and doubts. The grunts and groans weren't solely mine, a fact easily confirmed by the rising cacophony within Mabel Chung's Fit Futures. Since my arrival, the decibel level had undoubtedly spiked, transforming Arthur Penhaligon into part of the sonic wallpaper, a counterpoint to the rhythmic drone of treadmills and the relentless pulse of that synthetic music assaulting modern ears. I wrestled with the pec deck, a mechanical tormentor designed to isolate the chest muscles. Agro, my personal trainer, had, without consulting me, I might add, ratcheted up the resistance again. Something about progressive overload and stimulating dormant fibers. It sounded less like a gentle pectoral workout and more like pre-flight checks for the Starship Enterprise. In reality, I felt less like a sleek rocket and more like a rusty weather vane struggling to turn in a gale. Then it came, the unmistakable sting of youthful condescension. "That old codger's still at it, huh?" A female voice, dripping with a mix of disbelief and poorly veiled amusement. Yeah, saw him wrestling with the bench press earlier. Looked like he was trying to deadlift a sedan. This, from a male counterpart, his tone laced with, well, something other than respect. More like pity, seasoned with a dash of scorn. They presumed I was beyond hearing, imagining me as a doddering relic, probably drooling into a chalky protein supplement. They were mistaken, at least about the auditory impairment. I paused, hands clenched on the grips of the machine, the weight suspended precariously. A sharp pang shot through my lower back. Damn these aches. I straightened slowly, deliberately, and pivoted towards the source of the murmurs. Two young gym devotees, barely old enough to recall the screech of dial-up modems, were clustered around the water cooler, their eyes flickering between me and some iridescent concoction they were busy consuming. I met their gaze with my best disappointed patriarch glare. It had worked wonders on my grandson Damien in his youth. These two, however, merely smirked and pivoted away, suddenly engrossed in a poster for a Zumba class. Zumba! Good grief! The sheer audacity! Gossiping, judging, their smirks as visible as neon signs. Did they really believe I was oblivious? That I was some antiquated artifact misplaced amidst their temple of sculpted bodies and inflated egos? Let them whisper then. Let them doubt. Let them underrate me. It wouldn't be the first time. Back in '62, when I launched Penhaligon's Plumbing, everyone scoffed. Claimed pipes and wrenches were a dead end. Told me to stick with what I knew. They swallowed those words then, and these gym rats would be choking on theirs soon enough. I faced the pec deck once more, adjusted my grip, and pushed. My muscles screamed in rebellion, yet I forced them harder. I locked onto the burn, the strain, the sensation of my physique reacting, adjusting. My focus narrowed to the task at hand, the objective I had set for myself, not for their approval. For my own satisfaction, Mabel Chung, meanwhile, surveyed the unfolding scene from behind the reception desk. Our eyes met. She offered a hesitant smile, a brief flash of something inscrutable in her gaze. Amusement, definitely. Perhaps even a touch of wonder? I couldn't be sure. She approached, her vibrant pink leggings a stark contrast to the muted gray of the rubberized floor. "Everything all right, Mr. Penhaligon?" she inquired, her voice carefully devoid of judgment. "Tickety-boo," I grunted, forcing another rep. "Just admiring the artwork." A vague gesture towards the whispering duo, now absorbed in a spirited discussion about the alleged benefits of pre-workout powder. Mabel chuckled, a bright, musical sound. "They don't mean anything by it, Mr. Penhaligon. They're just youthful." "Youthful and clueless," I muttered under my breath. "Actually, they're impressed," Mabel confided, dropping her voice. "They've never encountered anybody your age so committed. You're an inspiration." "An inspiration? Me? That was certainly a novel notion," I snorted. "Don't let it go to your head, Mabel. I'm merely striving to demonstrate a point." "And what point would that be, Mr. Penhaligon?" I paused again, the weight, a heavy burden. I met Mabel's gaze, her expression earnest, her eyes inquisitive. "That I'm not quite finished yet," I declared, my voice resolute. "That I still have something left to prove, if only to myself." Mabel nodded slowly, her face thoughtful. "Well, you're certainly making a remarkable statement." She patted my arm, a surprisingly reassuring gesture. "Keep at it, Mr. Penhaligon. You're proving them wrong." I renewed my efforts. I shut out the whispers, the glances, the doubts. I centered on the iron, the perspiration, the ache. Each repetition was a small victory. Each set a stride forward. I was forging something more than mere muscle. I was cultivating resilience, resolve, a refusal to be defined by a single digit representing my years. Later that week, Damien arrived at the house. He generally reserved visits for Sunday dinners, making a Wednesday evening appearance highly unusual. Something was clearly amiss. "Grandpa," he announced, breezing into the living room without knocking. I visited Fit Futures today. I arched an eyebrow. Indeed. Decided to enlist in the army of the aesthetically obsessed? He fidgeted uncomfortably. No, not exactly. I felt compelled to witness things firsthand. Witness what, specifically? He swallowed hard. Witness whether you were actually doing this. I rose to my feet, slowly, deliberately. I began to unbutton my shirt. Damien's eyes widened in astonishment. He stared, dumbstruck, at my chest. It wasn't a Grecian masterpiece, to be sure, but it was firmer, more defined. Decidedly not the physique of a man patiently waiting for the final act. Well? I prompted, a grin tugging at the corner of my mouth. Impressed? He blinked, still struggling to articulate. Grandpa, you have abs? Almost, I quipped, flexing my abdominal muscles. Still a work in progress. He shook his head, a look of utter bewilderment on his face. I don't comprehend. How? Discipline, Damien, diligence, and a generous helping of stubbornness. I rebuttoned my shirt, experiencing a swell of satisfaction. I had made my point. To myself. And to him. As he departed that evening, Damien hesitated at the doorway, a pensive expression etched on his face. You know, Grandpa, he remarked. Maybe you're onto something. About what exactly? He shrugged. About everything, I suppose. I smiled, a sincere, heartfelt smile. Damn right I am. I watched him depart, a younger, possibly wiser, individual than he had been earlier. The whispers and suspicions faded into the ambient hum of my existence. They held no significance. The vital elements were the exertion, the advancement, the steadfast conviction in my own abilities. Age is merely an excuse, embraced by those reluctant to try, but Gramps knows best. Small victories. Still pumping iron, Methuselah? Damien's voice, laced with playful disbelief, nearly sent the dumbbell crashing onto my toes. A mere 10 pounds, yet after that last repetition, my arm felt like it was cast in lead. I shot him a look. Unlike some, I believe in more than a single set. Besides, someone needs to demonstrate fortitude to these greenhorns. He chuckled, though I caught a glint in his eye. Admiration? Or, perhaps, just gas. Truthfully, the initial weeks were brutal. Every fiber of my being screamed bloody murder. Ibuprofen became a dietary staple, and hot baths, a nightly ritual. Sleep offered little respite, punctuated by pained groans with every turn. The temptation to throw in the towel nagged at me, whispering that I was too far gone for the charade. My body, bless its decrepit frame, was staging a full-scale revolt. But then the snickers surfaced in my memory, the dismissive murmurings. He'll be done by Tuesday, someone had predicted. The thought of proving them wrong, of showing them an old codger could still learn new tricks, was enough to drag my aching carcass back to the Iron Cathedral. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. The first real triumph came with the bench press. I'd been chained to the same weight for what felt like an eternity, barely managing 3 shaky reps. But one morning, fueled by a cocktail of defiance and strong coffee, I hammered out 5. 5 glorious reps. It might not sound like much, but for me, it was akin to conquering Annapurna. I suppressed the urge to roar, settling instead for a knowing smirk directed at Damien, who responded with a slightly bug-eyed look. Then there was the treadmill. I'd commenced with a feeble 15-minute walk, feeling as if my lungs were about to stage an escape. Now, I was clocking 20, sometimes even 25, without the sensation of imminent expiration. I even dared to tackle a gentle incline without requiring immediate medical intervention. The aches, too, mellowed from a constant tormentor to a persistent reminder. Still present, a dull echo of encroaching age, but no longer the crippling, marrow-deep agony of those early days. More like trophies. Evidence that I was pushing limits, that I was actually accomplishing something. One afternoon, emerging from a particularly punishing session, I was changing in the locker room when Damien appeared. My sweat-drenched shirt lay discarded, revealing a torso that, while hardly chiseled, possessed discernibly less wobble than it had months prior. He froze, his jaw slack. "Grandpa," he sputtered. You're getting shredded." I snorted. "Shredded? Let's not get carried away, son. I'm still continents away from resembling those preening peacocks around here. But I am growing stronger, that's the crux of it." He simply stared, momentarily robbed of speech, an expression not witnessed since he was a small boy, gazing up at me with unabashed wonder. It felt gratifying, utterly gratifying. I persisted in my endeavors, lifting, walking, pushing. I even ventured into some of the modern exercises the young instructors espoused. Turns out those resistance bands are more than mere decoration. Of course, I remained faithful to my tried and true methods. There's an undeniable satisfaction in a straightforward workout with cold, unforgiving iron. No digital bells and whistles, just raw, unadulterated exertion. Others at the gym began to take notice. The whispers transformed, no longer laced with mockery. They held undertones of respect. Some even sought my counsel. Imagine that. Arthur Penhaligon, dishing out fitness wisdom to individuals young enough to be my progeny. One particularly boisterous weightlifter, who initially dismissed me as a senile relic, even approached me after I squatted a weight that had clearly been tormenting him. "Mr. Penhaligon," he admitted, his tone remarkably humbled, "I have to ask, what's the secret sauce?" I offered a wry smile. "No secret, son. Just diligence, resolve, and a liberal helping of stubbornness. Oh, and remembering that the only boundaries are those you impose upon yourself." Damien began shadowing me during certain workouts. The teasing persisted, yet the undercurrent had changed. No longer patronizing, but genuinely impressed. "You're certifiable, Gramps," he declared one day after witnessing me conquer a set of pull-ups. "Utterly bonkers, but I've got to hand it to you. It's damn inspiring." Inspiring. A descriptor I hadn't encountered in what felt like an eon, possibly never. I still grapple with the motivation that initiated this improbable journey. Perhaps the ageism, the sense of being brushed aside and disregarded. Perhaps a futile grasp at reclaiming a flicker of vanished youth. Or perhaps, just perhaps, an internal need to prove something to myself. Regardless of the catalyst, I am undeniably better for it. Stronger, healthier, infused with a renewed confidence. I've silenced the naysayers, impressed my grandson, and, most significantly, fortified my own sense of value. Age is nothing more than a flimsy excuse. True strength resides in mindset, not mere musculature. It blossoms from the unwavering conviction that you can attain whatever you pursue, irrespective of age. And from showcasing that you can move metal at any stage of life. Grandpa knows his stuff. Steroids and discipline. "You're looking changed, Arthur." Elias's voice cleaved the air, a rude interruption to the percussive clang of iron in my makeshift gym. Mid-lift, I strained against the barbell's weight, each muscle screaming in protest. Changed? At my age, that word usually presaged a decline, not an improvement. With a grunt of exertion, I eased the weight down, the bar clanking against the rack. "Changed how, you little rascal?" I mopped my brow with a towel, wary of soaking my already damp shirt. Elias lounged in the doorway, arms crossed, a knowing smirk plastered across his face. "You're getting bulkier, puffier, almost. Don't tell me you've been dabbling in any of those enhancements, Gramps?" He punctuated his words with a wink, thoroughly enjoying his teasing. My blood pressure, already elevated, threatened to blow a gasket. Performance enhancers? The very notion. My indignation flared. "Enhancements?" I practically roared, the sound amplified by the enclosed space. "The only things I'm enhancing are my fiber intake and lubricating my joints, and those are purely therapeutic." Elias's chuckle rasped against my already frayed nerves. "Right, Grandpa. Whatever you say. Just take it easy, okay? You're not exactly a teenager anymore." That was the last straw. A surge of youthful fury coursed through me, tempting me to demonstrate a bit of old-school discipline. But reason prevailed. I inhaled deeply. "Listen here, Elias. You think this is amusing? You think I woke up one morning and sprouted biceps like some lab-grown vegetable? This, I gestured towards my developing form, is the fruit of perseverance, dedication, and more perspiration than you've likely generated in your entire existence. It's not some chemical shortcut. I advanced, my shadow swallowing him. Think it's a picnic, dragging these ancient bones out of bed at the crack of dawn for workouts that would cripple a man half my age? Think it's easy to forego a proper Sunday breakfast laden with grease and goodness? It's not, Elias. It's grueling. It's confronting the mirror each day, seeing a testament to unfulfilled potential, and then possessing the fortitude to overcome it. That's the essence of this, not magic powders. The smirk evaporated, replaced by something resembling contrition? Excellent. Self-control, I continued, my voice a resonant grumble. Separates the winners from the also-rans, the gold from the dross. You get the picture. Self-control is the ability to fulfill obligations even when desire dictates otherwise. It's about fixing your sights on a goal and adhering to it, regardless of the obstacles. It's the only true elixir you need in this life. Comprehend? He nodded slowly, eyes glued to the floorboards. Yeah, Grandpa, I get it. Good. I pivoted back to the barbell, feeling a rush of righteous anger, and I confess, a hint of vindication. Steroids indeed. The audacity of the boy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I said, grasping the bar, I have steel to conquer. And you, I glanced back, could use some discipline of your own, perhaps trade the digital distractions for a breath of fresh air? He mumbled something about academic obligations and retreated inside. I watched him depart, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. He possessed a good heart, that lad. He simply required a gentle nudge. And a liberal application of grandpa wisdom. Truth be told, Elias's jab, as irritating as it was, had a touch of sweetness to it. Despite my vehement denials, a small part of me savored the implication that I was somehow artificially enhanced. It was a tribute to my efforts, an indication that people noticed the transformation. Not steroids, I knew, but stubbornness, pure and simple. I gripped the barbell tighter, centering my focus. Elias's words lingered, but now as fuel, igniting a renewed surge of resolve. I wasn't doing this for him, or for anyone. I was doing it for myself, to demonstrate that I wasn't ready for the rocking chair's embrace just yet. I lowered the bar, paused, and propelled it skyward with every ounce of my strength. I'd show him what this old man could do. I'd show them all, one rep at a time. I finished the workout, then cooled down before heading inside. Later, en route to the lavatory, I discovered Elias on my bed, poring over my training journal. He startled when I appeared. Sorry, Gramps. I was just curious, he stammered, snapping the journal shut. Curious about what? My secret pharmacological source? I inquired, arching a brow. He blushed crimson. No, I just wanted to glimpse your routine. It's impressive. My demeanor softened. Well, don't get any fanciful notions of replicating it. It's precisely calibrated to my seasoned physique. He chuckled. Wouldn't dream of it. But maybe. Perhaps you might demonstrate some fundamentals sometime. I feigned contemplation, pretending reluctance. Perhaps, but you must pledge unwavering obedience and no whining. Deal, he exclaimed, his eyes alight. As I ambled away, I couldn't suppress a smile. Perhaps, just perhaps, I was making a difference. And maybe, just maybe, Elias was beginning to grasp that age is merely a flimsy excuse. Gramps knows best. The shirtless revelation. The kid was supposed to meet me at the smoothie bar, gym bag in tow. Said he was ready to get swole, a phrase that still sounded ridiculous coming from him. I'd choked down my post-workout protein sludge, chalky and regrettable, despite Doc Miller's insistence, and was ducking into the locker room. Figured I'd spared the lad enough suffering for one day. He didn't need a front-row seat to my compression sock debacle. The locker room, blessedly, was mostly deserted. Barry from accounting was there, humming off-key, as he peeled his damp shirt with the reverence of unveiling a masterpiece. I looked away. Barry's commitment was commendable, but his physique? Not so much. I grabbed the locker with the bulky hinge, Nobody else wanted it. Fine by me. Extra elbow room. I unwound my wrist wraps. The familiar twinge spoke of the iron battle I'd just waged. Chest day. I'd hammered myself harder than I had in ages, very nearly revisiting my lunch after that incline press. My battered gym bag, a holdover from college, sat on the bench. Still redolent of mothballs and that awful muscle rub. I unzipped it, groped for a clean shirt, a plain gray tee, nothing ostentatious, and pivoted toward the locker, carefully avoiding Barry. That's when the door burst inward like a SWAT team entry, and Elias stood there, backlit and poised, as if auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. Only his face wasn't gleaming. It was flabbergasted. "Grandpa?" he croaked, his voice caught somewhere between a squeak and a gasp. I thought you were at the smoothie joint." I grunted, wrestling my sweat-drenched shirt off. No time for pleasantries. Just wanted to change and get home for a decent cuppa. Obviously not hotshot. Now, if you'll excuse me. That's when he saw them. My pectoral muscles, or the remnants thereof, after 8 decades and too much time on the couch. Not exactly Schwarzenegger material, more like vintage Schwarzenegger. Weathered, like a favorite old armchair. They had character. His jaw went slack. Actually, slack. I almost expected him to start catching bugs. "Grandpa," he stammered again, his voice still cracking with disbelief. What happened?" I froze, shirt halfway over my head, briefly blinded. "Happened? What's it look like? I've been working out, you nitwit. That's what happens." I finally got the shirt down, raked a hand through my thinning hair. A wave of self-consciousness washed over me, which was absurd. I was a pensioner in a locker room. No one expected Adonis. But Elias's face, it wasn't mockery. It wasn't even amusement. It was astonishment. Utter, wide-eyed astonishment. He blinked, swallowed hard. But you're shredded," I scoffed. "Shredded? Son, your perception's skewed." And yet, even as I said it, a spark, of pride perhaps, flickered to life within me. He thought I was shredded. Okay, relatively less doughy than anticipated for an octogenarian. Might be more truthful, but I wasn't about to prick his bubble. He took a step closer, eyes like saucers. He was gazing at me like I was some mythical being, a geriatric gladiator. I don't get it," he said, shaking his head in bewilderment. You're grandpa. You're supposed to be, well, ancient." Ah, there it was. The ageism I'd battled constantly, always lurking beneath the surface, baring its fangs. "Old is a state of mind, kid," I said, a sharper edge to my voice than I intended. "And right now, my mind's telling me I could still bench press your skinny frame." He barely registered my words. He was still riveted, transfixed, by my chest, or at least the general region where my chest used to reside. "But the stories?" he mumbled, lost in his own world. "Grandma always said you peaked in high school. She said you were all talk, no muscle." My ears pricked up. Now this was getting interesting. Did she now? A slow grin stretched across my face. "Well, your grandma wasn't always right now, was she?" He blinked again, struggling to reconcile the image of his frail, cardigan-clad grandfather with the phenomenon before him. It was like his cognitive circuitry was overloading. I never thought." His voice trailed off, unable to articulate the mental maelstrom raging inside. I chuckled, grabbing my trousers from the locker. "You never thought an old codger could spring a surprise, huh? That's your generation's problem. You underestimate us. You picture us all tottering around in slippers, waiting for the hearse to arrive." I stepped into my pants, drawing them up with a flourish. "Well, let me tell you something, kiddo. This old-timer's far from done. I've still got some juice left in these old bones, and a few reps left in this old frame." He remained speechless, staring, as I zipped up. I almost pitied him. Almost "So," I said, clapping him on the shoulder, "are you going to keep gaping all day, or are you going to pump some iron? Because if you're really keen on getting swole, you've got a mountain to climb." He finally snapped out of his stupor, a glint of determination returning to his eyes. "Yeah," he said, his voice firming. "Yeah, I'm ready. Show me what you've got, Grandpa." I grinned. "That's the spirit. Now, knock off the chest gawking and let's get moving. And try not to puke. I'm too ancient to mop that up." As we left the locker room, I couldn't suppress a surge of, not exactly pride, per se, more a deep satisfaction. I'd shattered his preconceptions, I'd thrown a wrench in his assumptions, and perhaps, just perhaps, kindled a little inspiration. Age might be just a number, but defying expectations? That's a language everyone understands. And sometimes all it requires is a shirtless epiphany to translate. Beer cooler deadlift. The Penhaligon family barbecue, a yearly ordeal of grilling, screeching, and forced pleasantries, was an event I usually dodged. Decades of predictable inquiries about my well-being, my garden, the perceived decrepitude I was apparently destined for. This year, however, felt different. A point to prove, not to that assembled crew, but to the man in the mirror, and perhaps, just perhaps, to Elias. The sun blazed down, a relentless spotlight turning my daughter's meticulously curated lawn into a shimmering emerald furnace. The air, heavy with the aroma of charred meat and cut-rate sausages, threatened to stage a rebellion in my stomach. I clung to a tall glass of iced tea, my sole defense against the sugary onslaught posing as refreshments. Elias, predictably, was present, perpetually tethered to his phone, offering the occasional monosyllabic response to his mother's chatter. His silence, since the gym encounter, had been a surprise, a slight sting, truth be told. Had I hoped for acknowledgement? A question or two? Maybe even a grudging respect for my continued existence? But no, just the veneer of polite teenage disinterest. The beer cooler, a gargantuan plastic box, dominated the patio, brimming with ice and the pale imitations of beer so popular these days. Every year, one of the younger, supposedly fitter men would make a spectacle of hauling it from the garage, a testament to the softness of the modern generation. This year, the honor fell to Timmy, my daughter's neighbor's boy. He approached the task with the puffed-up bravado of a seasoned strongman, cracking his knuckles like he was about to wrestle a bear. He heaved, strained, grunted, and managed to nudge the behemoth an inch. His face bloomed a furious red, a pulse throbbing at his temple. It looked like he was trying to dislodge a particularly stubborn boulder. "Need a hand there, Timmy?" my son-in-law David offered, his chuckle laced with condescension. Timmy, mortified, shook his head, gulping air. "Nah, I got it. Just hefty." He tried again, with identical fruitless results. The cooler remained stubbornly rooted. A small audience had gathered, their faces mirroring a blend of amusement and pity. Enough. I'd witnessed enough feebleness for one afternoon. I set down my iced tea with a sharp click, the sound slicing through the murmur of voices. "Let me lend you a hand, son," I said, my voice firm and steady. A hush fell over the patio. Every eye zeroed in on me, expressions shifting from incredulity to thinly veiled derision. The collective thought hung in the air. "Arthur? Arthur thinks he can move that?" Elias glanced up from his phone, a spark of genuine interest flickering in his eyes. For the first time all afternoon, he seemed captivated by something other than his digital realm. Timmy, scarlet-faced and defeated, yielded the space. "Be my guest, Mr. Penhaligon," he muttered, his tone dripping with irony. "But she's a stubborn one." I ignored him, striding towards the cooler. A deep breath, an assessment of the challenge. The weight was significant, yes. But more than that, it was awkward. The grips were too small, the balance uneven. This wasn't about raw power, it was about leverage and technique. Bending my knees, keeping my back straight, I mirrored the deadlifts I'd been practicing at the gym. My calloused hands found a firm hold. Another breath, core engaged, and I lifted. The cooler rose smoothly, almost eagerly. A surge of exertion coursed through my legs, my back, a welcome burn, the thrill of power, of mastery. I straightened, the cooler held firm. A collective gasp swept through the small crowd. Even David wore a mask of stunned surprise, his mouth hanging open like a beached trout. Timmy merely gaped, his jaw slack. I walked with measured steps towards the picnic table, the cooler seeming to lighten with each stride. I lowered it with a soft thump, the ice shifting within. Turning to face the onlookers, my expression remained carefully neutral. "There you have it," I announced, my voice level. "Now, everyone can enjoy their fizzy yellow water." I returned to my chair, retrieved my iced tea, and took a slow, deliberate sip. The silence that blanketed the patio was almost palpable. Then, Elias broke the spell. "Grandpa," he began, his voice tinged with awe. How did you do that?" I met his gaze, a newfound curiosity shining in his eyes, a flicker of something akin to respect. "Practice, Elias," I replied, my tone softening. "And a little faith in what you're capable of." He continued to stare, his face a mixture of wonder and disbelief, a dawning comprehension. Perhaps he was beginning to see there was more to his old grandpa than met the eye. The barbecue resumed, the din gradually escalating to its usual chaotic levels. But the atmosphere had shifted. The glances thrown my way were different now, infused with a newfound regard, perhaps a touch of wariness. Elias remained close for the rest of the afternoon, firing off questions about my training regimen, my nutrition, my everything. I answered with patience, sharing insights gleaned from hard work and newfound passion. As dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and violet, casting long shadows across the yard, Elias finally spoke. "Grandpa, I think I get it now." "Get what, son?" I asked, already anticipating his answer. "That age, it's just a number," he declared, his voice resonating with new conviction. "That you can be strong, no matter how old you are." I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "That's right, Elias," I affirmed. "That's right." As we headed toward the car, Elias paused, turned, and asked, "Grandpa, do you think you could teach me?" I clapped him on the shoulder, a wave of affection surging through me. "I was wondering when you'd ask, son." The drive home was tranquil, a comfortable quiet, punctuated by unspoken understanding. I glanced at Elias, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery, a contemplative expression etched on his face. He was regarding me through a new lens, no longer seeing an old man, but a man in full, a strong man. And in that moment, I understood that every ache, every challenge, every doubt, they were all worthwhile. I had not only rediscovered my strength, but ignited a spark in my grandson's soul. The beer cooler deadlift. Who knew such a seemingly insignificant action could carry so profound a weight? Grandfatherly wisdom, indeed. The student and the master. "All right, Gramps, cough it up," Elias demanded, propped against the dusty workbench. He feigned nonchalance, but his eyes betrayed his eagerness. The barbecue was a week past, and he'd been circling, all forced interest in my filately and feigned curiosity about the 57 weather. Finally, the dam had broken. "Cough what up?" I feigned ignorance, tinkering with a rusty wrench. I knew perfectly well what he craved. "Your secret, to this." He gestured vaguely at my bicep, likely still more formidable than his own, even beneath the worn flannel. I chuckled, a gravelly sound. "Secret? Just elbow grease and a heaping measure of mule-headedness." He rolled his eyes, exasperated. "Come on, Gramps, there's gotta be more. You're 80 plus. You shouldn't be able to hoist a cooler, let alone whatever you do at that gym." Ah, the gym. Mine. The designation still felt peculiar. Once a place of alienation, now a sanctuary. It had fanned embers long thought extinguished. "The place welcomes anyone with the fortitude to walk in, Elias. Age is beside the point." Fine. So, enlighten me about the fortitude." He was hooked now. Phone forgotten. Progress indeed. I straightened. the wrench clanging on the metal surface. Fortitude is unwavering discipline, showing up even when every fiber screams for the couch, pushing past the body's protests, devouring the dreaded broccoli even when a donut sings its siren song. He grimaced at the broccoli's mention. Sounds brutal. Life can be a thorny path, Elias. Doesn't mean you surrender to the brambles. I ambled to the salvaged weight rack, groaning under the flea market plates. These are just inert lumps of iron, pointless alone. But with the right application, the right metal, they become instruments of transformation. He watched as I loaded the bar with a respectable weight. So, you just hoist heavy things until you're Hercules? Physically, yes, but the true power resides here. I tapped my forehead. It's the conviction that you can, the muting of that insidious voice that whispers of age, weakness, weariness. It's about defying that voice, proving it a liar. He gnawed his lip, lost in thought. He was weighing the broccoli against the pain, no doubt. So, could you maybe teach me? The question was almost a plea. I arched a brow. Teach you? Are you sure you're ready for that, son? I don't coddle. He hesitated, then squared his jaw. Yeah, I'm ready. I want to see what I'm capable of. A smile tickled my lips. All right then, tomorrow, 0600. Don't be tardy. His face crumpled. 6 a.m. on a Saturday? Discipline, Elias. Remember? The sun won't adjust its schedule for your slumber. The following morning, he materialized, bleary-eyed and muttering, clad in a wrinkled tee. I was already stretching, the garage air sharp, the dawn just breaking. All right, sleepyhead, I greeted, clapping my hands. Let's gauge your mettle. We started with the basics. Squats, push-ups, planks. He struggled, he groused, he looked ready to lose his breakfast, but he persevered. And that, I knew, was a victory. Form, Elias. Form is paramount. You aspire to resemble me, or inhabit a wheelchair, I barked. The initial weeks were a gauntlet. Every muscle shrieked in protest. He grumbled about the pre-dawn hours, the flavorless food, the chronic fatigue. I pushed, perhaps too hard, but Penhaligon's stubbornness was in his blood. One afternoon, following an especially punishing deadlift set, he collapsed onto the bench, struggling for oxygen. I don't know, Grandpa, he gasped. I don't think I can hack this. I sat beside him, silent. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by dejection. You know, I said finally, when I first embarked on this journey, I was petrified. Old, flabby, surrounded by youngsters who probably envisioned my imminent demise, but I persisted, incrementally, rep by rep, because I had something to prove, not to them, to myself. His eyes searched mine. What were you trying to prove? That I wasn't obsolete, that I still possessed untapped potential, that I could still reclaim strength. Silence hung in the air. Then he straightened a little. Okay, he said, wiping his brow. Okay, one more. I smiled inwardly. That was my boy. As weeks morphed into months, a transformation unfolded. He appeared punctually, without complaint. He challenged himself, lifting heavier loads. He even embraced broccoli. One day, he caught me scrutinizing him in the mirror. Shirtless, he wiped the bench after presses. His chest and arms displayed newly etched muscles. What? He asked, self-conscious. Just impressed, I admitted. You've traveled far, Elias. He grinned, a genuine, confident expression. Thanks, Gramps. Couldn't have navigated it alone. Our routine continued. I prodded. He astonished. We were forging something more than muscle, a connection long dormant. One evening, post-workout, he turned, pensive. You know, Grandpa, he said, I used to perceive you as ancient, set in your ways, out of touch. I chuckled. And now? He shrugged. Now, I see you're still ancient, he winked, but also kinda badass. My laughter boomed. Took you long enough, son. I surveyed the garage, the weights, the equipment, the sweat-soaked benches. Humble, but ours. A crucible where we pushed limits, challenged each other, and rediscovered the essence of vigor. He was mastering iron, but I was learning too. It wasn't solely about the weight, the sweat, the ache. It was about kinship, about legacy, about illustrating that age is merely a construct. And that, sometimes, Gramps does indeed know best. Gramps knows best. Elias, bless his misguided enthusiasm, was staging his own personal strongman competition with that deadlift. Every muscle strained, face contorted, his veins throbbed like blue rivers across his skin. I, meanwhile, was more concerned with the state of my own spine. Frankly, ego had long ceased to fuel my workouts. Let them snicker behind cupped hands, those patronizing smiles bouncing off me like rain. Let them chalk it up to some geriatric crisis playing out in iron and sweat. Their opinions held no weight. The heat driving me now was cleaner, purer, a singular flame. My own. Chalk dusted my hands, settling into the landscape of wrinkles etched by time. It was comical how a bit of powder could conjure the feeling of imminent triumph, at least over the cold, unyielding steel. I drew in a breath, the gym's pungent cocktail of exertion and metal filling my lungs. This place had become my refuge, a realm where only my own judgment held sway. The barbell crashed back to earth, a metallic roar echoing Elias's frustrated groan. He sprawled on the bench, resembling a gasping fish pulled from the water. I don't get it, Gramps, he wheezed. Diets dialed, sleep sorted, why no progress? I lowered my own weights with a controlled release, the familiar heft grounding me. Obsessed with gains, are we? Think it's all about inflating biceps? I inquired, scrubbing my brow with a towel. Take a good look, son. You're stronger than when you started this circus. You stand tall, move with purpose. He waved a dismissive hand, scoffing. Yeah, inner peace. I want to bench my body weight, not have warm fuzzies. A dry chuckle rattled in my chest. Feeling good is a decent foundation, lad. Besides, those bulging muscles will fail you if you lack the metal to wield them. He finally focused on me, a glimmer of something beyond peak in his eyes. Metal? Metal, I confirmed. That nagging voice whispering, give up. You muzzle it. That's the core strength you need to forge, Elias. The one between your ears. I approached the squat rack, adjusting the barbell with practiced ease. Elias watched, a spark of curiosity ignited in his gaze. What's this, Gramps? Didn't you already finish squats? Warm up, I grunted, not bothering to look. The barbell settled on my shoulders, a comforting weight that anchored me. Inhaling deeply, I found my center and descended. I could feel his eyes on me, fixed on my every movement. He'd witnessed my squats before, but this felt different. Perhaps it was the composure I projected, the inner resolve radiating from me. Or maybe it was the raw determination etched on my face, driven by a singular purpose. I completed the set, re-racked the weight, and turned to face him. Sweat streamed down my face, my muscles screamed, yet a wave of satisfaction rolled over me. You know, Gramps, Elias said, his tone subdued. I think I'm starting to get it. Get what? I asked, already suspecting the answer. It's not just about the iron, he admitted, gesturing to the rack. It's everything else. The discipline, the tenacity, the metal. I offered a curt nod, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. Took you long enough, son? In truth, I was unearthing aspects of myself, long dormant, buried beneath the sediment of years. I was tougher than I recalled. Stubborn, certainly. And maybe, just maybe, I still possessed something worthwhile to offer, even at my age. Later that week, during my bench press, Elias approached as I'd stripped off my shirt in the gym's sweltering heat. He froze mid-stride. I could see the astonishment in his eyes, the way they widened as he surveyed my weathered, yet surprisingly sculpted, torso. Decades of neglect hadn't completely eradicated the evidence, it seemed. Beneath the lines and loose skin, the ghost of the man I once was still lingered. He stammered, "Gramps, you're jacked," I snorted, returning the barbell to its rack. "Jacked is a bit of a stretch, son. Let's just say I haven't completely crumbled to dust yet." He shook his head, still transfixed. "But how? You're 81. I grabbed my towel, blotting the sweat from my chest, pointedly flexing my bicep as I did. "Age is just a number, Elias. A number you can clock in the jaw if you're willing to put in the sweat equity." Elias resumed his own workout with a newfound ferocity. He still struggled, still muttered curses, yet a different fire burned in his eyes now. A spark of resolve, of resilience, of metal. I watched him, a quiet swell of pride in my chest. He had a long journey ahead, but he was finally on the correct path. And sometimes, that's all that counts. I saw Elias fixating on the squat rack again, but something had changed. It wasn't a look of trepidation, but one of pure focus. He was actually giving it some thought. He started setting up, and I walked over to him. He placed the weight, but didn't squat. He simply stared at the weight. "What are you waiting for?" I asked. "I don't know if I can do it, Gramps." I smirked. "Gramps knows best.